Welcome to TrapCG's Introduction to After Effects. In this tutorial series, you're going to learn how to create 3 different logo animations, which is going to teach you After Effects' interface, how to animate, composite, and create effects, all within the program. Now let's go ahead and get started. We're going to begin with file management. So I've created a folder called Logo Animation. That's where we're going to save everything to. I created it on my secondary drive, not my primary drive. Primary is where your operating system is saved. If you save to your primary drive, eventually your system will slow down. Especially when you're working with After Effects, it's best to always store to a secondary drive, okay? Now in the folder, I'm gonna go inside of it, I'm gonna create a new folder called Logo, all right? And in this folder is where I'm gonna place any logo I'm gonna use for this tutorial. So you can use Photoshop files or Illustrator files, but it's gotta be one or the other, a layered document. And if you don't have a logo, what you need to do is you can go to brandsoftheworld.com and you can actually pretty much find any logo you ever want here. And they're all Illustrator, or I should say they're all vector files, so they can be opened up in Illustrator. So let's say you wanted the Apple logo. You can see here they have a ton of different Apple logos. You can choose, let's say, Coca-Cola. Oops. And you can see they have a ton of different Coca-Cola logos. Now these should be free. I don't remember having to buy any of these, but let's say you find one that you like, just click on it. And you can click, I agree, oops, I'm not a robot, and click download. And that should save it to your downloads folder. Okay, and again, this will be an Illustrator file. If you want to follow along with exactly what I'm doing, jump over to trapcg.com, go to the resources tab, and click on the TrapCG logo here, or click on click to download. All right, and that's going to download a zip file. Then you can go to your downloads folder, and in here, this is the TrapCG logo. You can right click, extract all, and I'm just going to say extract, and then here's the actual Illustrator file. All right, so this is the one I'm going to be using, and this is where you can get it. Now, if you purchase this tutorial on trapcg.com, then you can actually, this will be in the zip file that contains all the video files, all right? So you'll already see the trapcg logo.ai. So I'm gonna go ahead and drag and drop the Illustrator file into the logo folder, all right? So this is the one I'm gonna use. I can delete this one now. And I'm gonna go ahead and load up this logo. Now you can use Photoshop or Illustrator. You don't have to use one or the other. The big thing is that you need to separate all your elements of your logo onto different layers. Now if you're not familiar with Illustrator, don't panic. We're just going to use it briefly to separate this logo out. So it's not going to be like an in-depth tutorial in Illustrator. Just enough to get you through being able to separate your logo. So if your interface doesn't look like this, it could mean that you've up on Window, choose Workspace, Essentials, and it still doesn't look like this, just click Reset Essentials. All right, if you really need to follow along exactly how mine is laid out. Okay, so first I like to just squash my toolbar, even though really these are the only 2 tools we're going to use in this tutorial. The black arrow tool, which allows me to select an entire element, and the white arrow tool, which allows me to select little vertex handles. Because this is vector, these elements are changeable. Okay. So the other thing I need to open is the layers panel. So I can either come up to Window and go Layers, or I could have clicked on it over here. So I'm going to grab this top bar and move it. I'm actually going to slide it over until it highlights in the side here, just like that. That way I have all my layers visible right here. So you can lay out your Layers tab any way you want, but you need it open so you can see what you're doing. Okay, so now that we have the logo in place, what I need to do is create a new document that's the size of the output in After Effects, meaning that how big are you going to make this logo animation? So we're going to go ahead and go File, New, and we're going to choose, let's see here, Video and Film, okay? And then under Size right here, you can choose HDTV 1080p, or if you're going to use 720p, it's all up to you what size you're going to use. Now, I'm actually just demonstrating this as being the actual option for video and film. I don't tend to like to use this because it gives us a checkered background. What I'm going to switch to is web. And then I'm going to manually change the size to what I want. So I'm going to say 1920 by 1080. Okay. So 1920 by 1080 is HD. If I want a smaller file, probably 1280 by 720 is the next step down. So it's up to you. If you think your computer can handle it, stick with HD. If not, then drop down to the lower HD, which is 1280 by 720. And everything else in here is good. It's definitely not going to be any higher than 72 ppi. Number of artboards, we don't need any, so 1 is fine. All right, so I'm going to click OK. And if you don't see all this stuff, don't worry. As long as you can see the width and the height, that's the big thing. And we can give it a name. We'll call this Trap CG Video. VID logo. Trap CG Video logo. Click OK. Okay, so now I'm going to grab all these elements with my black arrow tool, and I just left click and drag over all the elements. And again, I'm using this tool right here, and I'm going to drag it into this tab and then let go. Okay, so again, I selected all the elements, I dragged them into this tab, holding down the left click, and then I let go of the left click to drop it. So I'm going to hold down Shift and scale this guy up. Now, my suggestion is to come up to Object and Group. Even if it is already grouped, this is just a safe range because we want to center this object. And if I tried centering it without grouping it, all my pieces will fall apart. So with it grouped, I'm going to come up to here. You see this little icon right here, and I want to align to Artboard. Okay. Now, older After Effects, it might be like a thin tab instead of a square box, but there should be an option to be able to click Align to Artboard, or you should be able to open up the Align tab. And then in here, you should be able to choose Align to Artboard in the older version of After Effects. I'm not seeing it here, but these are the align tools that we're going to be using. It's the same thing up here. So we need to align it to the center, and then for left and right, and then the center for up and down. So I'm going to click here. And then I'm going to roll over the corner here, hold down Shift and scale it up. And if I hold down Shift and Alt, it's going to scale it out from the center. All right. And what you want to do is make it big as possible. All right. So that way we're not losing any resolution when we bring into After Effects. Or if you really want to be picky, make it the final size that the animation needs to be displayed at the end of the animation. All right, the logo needs to be displayed at the end of the animation. So let me go ahead. I think I'm going to choose a logo final size. So I think this would be a good final size for a logo. And if I want, maybe I can bump, you know what, I'm going to leave it. This is perfect. Okay. So again, you can choose the final size, but the big thing is laying it out in the center of your comp, and that your comp is the right size for After Effects, because this is going to automatically create a composition inside After Effects at the right size. And later that will all make sense. Okay, so with the logo, we're going to go ahead and go Object and Ungroup. And you might want to ungroup it a couple of times, make sure no pieces are stuck together. And then over in your Layers tab, if you click this little tab right here, it's called Create New Layer. Click it a couple of times, and you can create a bunch of layers. So we're going to separate all these pieces out on new layers. So I'll start with the Trap CG. So the T, I'm going to select the T, and you can see here I get this little colored box right here. You can drag and drop it. Now if you're using Photoshop, you literally just select the layer you want and hit Control X or Control C, create a new layer, Control V, and you're pasting on a new layer. So again, that's Photoshop. I'm not going to go through and show how to use Photoshop, so hopefully you already understand how to separate things out in Photoshop. The big thing is being able to create layers. It doesn't matter if you're using Photoshop or Illustrator, you need a bunch of layers. So, sorry for the rant. Let me continue. So the R, click on it, drag and drop it to the next layer. Click A, drag and drop to the next layer. P, drag and drop to the next layer. Now I'm going to also mention something else. Let's say in a scenario where these two letters, if I selected one, it selected both of them for whatever reason. Okay. What you can do is come over and use the wide arrow tool. Select one element just by clicking on it, or drag selecting over it, right? Go to your black arrow tool, and then again use the drag and drop option, okay? And that will move that element over to the next layer. So the wide arrow tool is kind of like a sub selection, and the black arrow tool is a primary selection. In my case, we don't have to worry about that. So let me go to the next P, drag and drop, next C, drag and drop, and G, drag and drop. So let me go ahead and rename these. This is going to be T, R, A, P, P. And sometimes it will open a pop-up window when you're double clicking to rename. That's fine. C, G. Oops. Okay. So TRAPPCG, trap CG. And now the actual logo, we're going to separate that as well. So let me create more layers. I don't know how many I'm going to need. I'm just creating a bunch. Okay, so I'm going to start with the top piece here, the center top piece. I'm going to drag and drop it. In fact, I'm going to start renaming this stuff now. Center. In fact, I'm going to start with T for top, center. Okay, and the next one's going to be T, and let's do right. And the next one is going to be T, left. And it is a very good idea to rename your layers as you're doing this. So I'm going to go T right and T left. Okay. And now I'm going to go to the next piece. I'll say outer, so O, outer piece, maybe O, P, let's see, OP, I don't even know, OP1, I guess. So let me drag and drop this to OP1. So I'll say O underscore P underscore 2. And let's do this piece. O underscore P underscore 3. I guess I could have called those OP right and left instead of 3 and 2, but oh well. It all depends on how you can remember the separating of the layers. So let me get a few more layers in here, and this one's going to be, let's see, 2, 3. I'll say OP, oops, 4. Drag and drop, and go to the next one. O, P, 5. Drag and drop. And it looks like we're going to need 1, 2, 3, 4 more layers, because remember we have a layer right here. So got 2, 3, 4. Start with this top piece, and I want to add the little bar with it. So I'm going to drag and drop that. We'll call this I for inner piece 1. And let me actually copy the IP underscore. That way I can just paste it. So next one's going to be IP 2, IP 3, IP 4, and might as well just rename this IP 5. Okay, so this is going to be 2. This one is going to be 3. Looks like I might need one more layer. Drag and drop this to the bottom, call it IP6. All right, so IP4 was this piece. Actually, no, I didn't. Did I? So 3, 4, 5. Oh, no, I didn't need IP6. Spaced out for a sec. Okay, so that works. Each piece is on its own layer. That's exactly the way we wanted it. And we're ready to rock and roll. So let's go ahead and go File, oops, Save As. And we're going to save it into our logo animations folder that we created, logo. And we'll call this Trap CG Video Logo. That's exactly the way I want to call it. And click Save. And we're going to save it as an Illustrator CC file and click OK. We can now close Illustrator and open up After Effects. This is After Effects. So the first thing I like to do is set up my interface to match whatever project I'm working on. So right now I'm in this standard workspace. You can see here it says Workspace Standard. I can click through here and choose different workspaces. Now if you don't have this option, you got to come up to Window, Workspace, and choose it in here. Now there's a few things in this that you may not see if you're running an older version of After Effects, and that is the Libraries tab right here. Don't worry, we're not going to be using it. So let's go ahead and start closing out windows that we don't need. The three primary windows we're going to need right off the bat is the project window where we import our stuff, the timeline, which is going to be where our stuff's going to be dragged and dropped to for layered elements, and then the composition, which is going to be the video playback area. So I don't need info right now. I'm going to right click on that tab and say close tab. I don't need audio, right click, close tab. The preview window you may need if you're not going to use shortcut keys to play back your animation. So for right now, I'm not going to need it. So I'm going to right click, close tab. The Libraries tab I don't need, right click, close tab. And the effects and presets right now I don't need. So I'm going to right click, close tab. Okay, so I really cleaned it up. Now I only have the three windows and then the top bar window here. I'm going to go ahead and go window, workspace, and new workspace, and I'm going to call this, let's just say N_1. You can name it whatever you want. Click OK, and you can see now N_1 has been added to the list. All right, so I can always jump back to standard and then click reset standard, yes, to reset it back to its original layout. Okay, so I'm going to go back to N_1. Okay, the next thing I need to do is set up the back end of After Effects, so how well it works with the particular system I'm working on. So I'm going to go over to File and go into Preferences, and we're going to do General. Let's just click on General right now. So in here you can actually change more of the interface. I'm not going to go through all these settings. You can go through and take a look and then Google which each one does. We don't have enough time in this tutorial to go through everything. But there's a few things I need to do to improve After Effects' performance. Number one, under previews, you might want to look to check your GPU information and configuration. So if you got a pretty good GPU, you can play with this. Right now my GPU is unsupported, but it still seems to work fairly well. Of course, you probably want to try to get a supported GPU in your computer for After Effects. You'd have to go to Adobe's online help forum to find out which graphics cards are supported by After Effects. I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel for now. The area I really need to focus on is media disk cache. Okay, so right now I've actually chose a specific area to where I'm storing my disk cache and databasing. Now the reason why this is important is because this is normally being stored to your C drive or your primary drive, and this will eat up a lot of space and really slow down your computer. Now you can see here that ideally they would like to store to an SSD drive. I do not have an SSD drive in this computer, but if you really want to see a huge performance boost in what you're working on, try to get some SSD drives in your computer. So the first thing I'll do is go choose folder, and I'll choose a folder that's not on the primary drive. So you can see here my primary drive is my C drive. On a Mac it would be called image, and then you can see your other drives. I've already got work 2 and work. So on my work drive I've created a folder. You can see here it says After Effects Disk Cache. That's what I named it. And this is where I'm saving all my stuff to. So I selected the After Effects Disk Cache. Okay. And I also did the same thing for the database. I stored it to there as well. So that way, again, I'm not eating up resources on my primary drive, slowing my computer down. So this is very important to change. I don't think there's an option where you can check save where the file is being saved. Probably not. Okay, so the next thing I want to go over is the media and disk cache. That's memory right here. Okay, so if you're running lots of memory, of course you want to play with how much RAM is being reserved for other programs. Now, between After Effects and Premiere, my suggestion is that you need to be running about 16 to 32 gigs on the bare minimum. My machine is fairly old, so I'm only running 8 gigs. I can tell you this right now that sometimes my computer will freeze or while I'm either editing in Premiere or working in After Effects because I don't have enough RAM allocated for the rest of the system. I should have at least 4 gigs allocated to the rest of the system. And maybe even up to 7. A lot of people on the forums will say that once you get to 7 gigs for the rest of the system, your system will rarely crash or freeze. It doesn't really crash as often as it just freezes and you can't do anything until it unfreezes. So again, just keep that in mind. Try to get your system up to at least 16 or even 32 and then allocate at least 7 gigs for the rest of the system. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel. And I think that was pretty much it. Whoops, let me go back into preferences. memory, just to make sure. Yeah, reduce cache when system. I mean, you could play with this, but I don't really ever check it. Let's see, is there anything else? Video preview. Enable Mercury Transmit. That allows you to play to like an external monitor. I don't have an external monitor, so there's no point turning it on. And that's pretty much it. You have options for appearance, where you can actually choose how dark and light your environment is. Just like that. That's pretty cool. I think that's pretty much it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. So once you have all that set, make sure you do hit OK so it saves it. I'm going to go ahead and end here with part 1, and that way part 2 will be the start of actually importing the logo and creating your first logo animation. And then part 3 should be creating your second logo animation, and 4 should be creating your more advanced logo animation. So hopefully those are the steps that we're going to take. But like I said, this is going to be end of part 1, and go ahead and go over to part 2 to continue this tutorial.